When I first got the beta invite for Elder Scrolls Online, I was very excited and very skeptical. I knew it wasn't the same team that had done Skyrim, and in fact was a different team altogether that was designing ESO, so I figured there would be a different feel to the game than a traditional Elder Scrolls game.
You're going to need it. A fellow prisoner, the name's Lyris.
This unfortunately proved to be a worst-case scenario, and while ESO uses the lore and characterizations distinct to the Elder Scrolls series, it fails to feel like an Elder Scrolls game at almost every level.
Ha! That sounds like the Prophet, all right. He's a prisoner here too. It was very dangerous for him to speak to you, even for a moment.
Voiceovers abound in the early sections of the game, and they're quite well done. This may be one of the strongest factors in favor of ESO, but comparatively speaking, it fails to live up to the standards set by the latest Star Wars MMO.
Tamriel's a long way from here. Keep your weapon ready and stay sharp. This place is full of surprises.
The story itself is interesting in a vague sense, but people unfamiliar with the Daedra, godlike beings that lord over the denizens of Nim, the world of the series, are probably going to feel a little bit lost.
Mighty and noble warrior, trust in her.
As far as epic beginnings go, ESO had a lot to live up to, as Skyrim has set the standard by which all heroic RPGs are likely to be judged.
One fine day in the middle of the night. Hello, what's this? Out for a stroll then? Lovely day for it. Sir Cadwell, yes indeed, a pleasure.
To be fair, as a single-player game, Skyrim was better able to make you feel more epic, whereas in ESO, no matter how important they might say you are, having 30 other people just like you running in circles and slash dancing as feral Shriven attack is going to take a bit of the wind out of the SS Epic's sails.
Fun little jaunt actually, full of traps and corpses and nasty beasties filling up the bits
in the current iteration of the initial story, for example, I'm barely able to learn anything about Lyris Titanborn, let alone form an attachment to her, before she's self-sacrificing herself to save the Prophet.
Running in skull passion as well.
All right. The good news is we made it here in one piece, and the Prophet looks unharmed. Now the bad news. It's going to be up to you to keep him safe and get him back to Tamriel. I'm not going with you. I probably should have mentioned this before, but it never seemed like the right time. There's a trick to opening the cell. The only way for a prisoner to leave is for another living soul to take their place.
It's hard to empathize with the characters here as I did in Skyrim, because they come and go as they please. I never feel like I earn their trust, and as soon as I start to care about one, I've moved on to a new location with an entirely different cast of characters.
He'll destroy everyone and everything we've ever
I give
loved.
myself that the Prophet might be free!
That said, the later stages of the game might be improved, but I can't say for sure as I only had 2 weekends of beta to play so far, and there were a lot of things I wanted to look at. Judging from the feel of the first 10 levels, however, I find it highly doubtful that there's going to be something as interesting as Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood questline.
Thank the divines you are safe.
One of my favorite aspects of Skyrim was my ability to disrupt a quest or betray a quest giver to pursue my own agenda, and have the world react appropriately. My favorite instance of this was when I was approached by a cannibal cult asking me to join them.
Who are you? What's going on?
When was your first
Priest
meal?
of Arcay, I'm your friend.
Dogs count.
You're my
Of course they don't count.
friend.
My friend
Yes,
Merrick's.
I'm your
We were
friend,
hunting,
and
I
I've
thought it was
invited
an
you
elk.
to dinner.
Must have been invited to dinner. So
Either way, I came back with
Why
meat
don't
for
you
the
lay
table.
down and rest while we get the meal
They
ready?
insisted I bring a sacrifice to their dinner table to cement the deal. I went so far as to bring the potential meal, a priest, to the cult, who had all gathered for the event. However, when they asked me to carve him up, I instead turned the knife on them and was able to eliminate the entire cannibal cult in one fell swoop. You can't kill quest givers in ESO, nor can you kill anyone that isn't already considered an enemy. This eliminates one of the quintessential components of what made Skyrim so interesting. I felt I had true agency throughout that game, even if it was an illusion, simply because I could turn my knife on anyone at any time in order to pursue my own agenda. Fundamentally, without this aspect, ESO's quest lines lose their player agency and end up feeling incredibly empty by comparison to Skyrim. They are arguably on par with World of Warcraft, but that isn't enough anymore. There do seem to be a few dialogue choices during conversations, but I've yet to feel like I've made a meaningful choice that would have changed the predestined outcome. This is likely due to the limitation of being an MMORPG, and wanting players to have similar worldviews. That is to say, if I see a certain quest giver, so can the person adventuring next to me. Combat has a number of issues. The model is acceptable for a modern MMORPG. It has a charge-up system for attacks, giving it a heavy and light attack for combat. But without any sort of combos in those basic attacks, combat quickly devolves into rapid clicking combined with button presses to use abilities. The same stuff we've seen in RPGs since Diablo 1. That said, landing a sneak attack on an unsuspecting enemy does feel quite good, and due to the number of abilities within the game, and your ability to learn almost any of them, there's likely a lot more to the combat than I'm going to see in the first 10 levels. The most egregious issue for me is the lack of physics. Without physics, the firing of your bow feels empty, as you cannot miss an enemy as long as it is highlighted in red. But you can forget about lining up a perfect shot that lands straight in the eye. The arrow won't appear in the enemy at all, giving the use of the bow a hollow feeling that leaves you longing for Skyrim. Skills are the closest to feeling like an Elder Scrolls game, as you can increase your skill simply by using the weapon associated with a skill, or wearing the type of armor you want to skill up in. If you wear light armor, your light armor skill increases as you get attacked. Swing a sword and your sword skill goes up. Block with your shield, and your shield skill goes up. These skills level up with use, and don't seem to be connected to your level, though I'm not sure how much further a skill can go above your level. Each level of the skill seems to take progressively longer to achieve, though I'm not sure on the precise numbers. As you advance in the skill, you unlock potential abilities, and you can then use a skill point, which is earned by leveling up or by collecting 3 sky shards, to learn that ability. All the abilities I have seen are active use, and though there are dozens of them, you can only have 7 on your quick bar, including 1 ultimate. One of the more problematic issues for me that breaks the concept of a skill-based system is that you select a class when you create a character. This locks you into a certain skill set for your core abilities. Granted, you can choose any of the weapon or armor skills, but it's quite strange to be picking a class and restricting myself to one set of abilities. It goes against what some of the previous Elder Scrolls games have done, and it's somewhat frustrating to see thrown into a game that could have potentially dared to do something different from nearly every other MMORPG out there. It's almost as if they wanted to break the meta of MMORPGs, that is to say, the tank, healer, damage dealer triad that has plagued us since EverQuest, but they failed at the last second to pull it off and put it back in there, or perhaps they got scared and decided that people just had to have assigned roles when it came to groups and raids. It's unclear exactly why they did it, as any character can still wear any armor and use any weapons they like, along with the skills associated with them. That isn't to say classes are bad, it's just that it might have been more interesting for players to be able to pick and choose from multiple sets of skills rather than restricting them to a set based on the initial class they picked. Though nothing has been said about class switching, it seems very unlikely as the skills gain in experience, and it's unlikely they'd allow a player to move that experience to another tree. Once you have unlocked an ability, you can then level it up by using it in combat. This increases its power in combat. There's also a way to customize abilities by morphing them, but I didn't understand it unfortunately, and the game didn't explain it. Lockpicking returns, and you'll need to get the hang of it, as the only decent items that drop come from locked chests. It feels pretty good for an MMORPG, and it's nice to see a well thought out minigame among the more mundane and standard gameplay aspects. Other than quests, the vast majority of stuff you pick up will be trade skill related, and most of it is for provisions. The lack of interesting loot is one of my major troubles with the game, as I got quite sick of seeing the same drippings, aged meat, and grapes over and over again as I mindlessly looted everything in sight. Your inventory starts with 50 slots, and each slot can hold a seemingly infinite number of one category of item. For example, drippings are one slot, no matter how many you seem to find. Bottles are another. This quickly becomes problematic as you find real items, and you end up deleting large stacks of fish bait and other assorted junk for trade skills in order to make room. As much as I was not a fan of the carrying weight system in Skyrim, this one is quite annoying itself as I have to constantly go back to the major hub town in order to use up all of the things I found or dump them in the bank for later. This leads to another issue. I have no home! It seems that player housing is either not on the table or is being saved for an expansion. However, without a home, one of the biggest draws of the Elder Scrolls series is lost. The possibility of building up your home, decorating it exactly as you wish, and then showing it off to your friends is not there. What's worse, thievery is non-existent. You cannot pick pockets, there's nothing to steal, and there's no picking locks to invade people's homes. If you were a fan of the Thieves Guild quests in Skyrim, there's almost nothing for you in ESO. Similarly, if you were a fan of the Dark Brotherhood, since there's no murdering of quest givers or innocents in ESO, you're out of luck.
Nice weaponry, but do you know how to use it?
Crafting armor and weapons is fairly standard. You collect metal ores or break down weapons you find in order to create an ingot. Then you use the ingot in combination with a decorative item to create a style of armor or weapon. For example, if you want to create a Khajiit item, you need to use a moonstone. You also need to know that style. You start with one style, which is based on the race you picked for your character, and others can be learned by finding books in the world. Items may also have special properties, and you can research an item that has the property to learn how to craft items with that special property. For example, if you find an armor chest piece with a sturdy trait, which allows you to avoid decay in your item when defeated, you can research the sturdy trait from that item, destroying the item in the process. From then on, you can create chest pieces with the sturdy trait, if you have the special gem or item that is required to craft that trait. Notably, unlocking the sturdy trait is on an item-per-item basis, meaning if you research sturdy for chests, you can only make sturdy chest pieces, not sturdy gloves or boots, etc. Researching also takes many hours, so you're likely to build up a stockpile of banked items with various traits on them. This is likely to keep you coming back to the game on a daily basis, but the cynical designer in me says that this will later become a monetization hook. Want to research that instantly? Well, it'll only cost you 10 freedom coins, which is like $30 or something. I mean, you can wait if you want, but it's only 10 freedom coins. Come on, click on it. It's instant. Overall, the crafting system for armor and weapons are pretty deep and worth exploring further. Provisions, which creates food, is less interesting, and alchemy drops were so rare that I think I was only able to make one potion, and it was just a simple health potion. There's promise in alchemy, but not without dramatically expanding the drops of alchemical components in the world. Fishing exists, and it's about what you'd expect. There were no rare fish or items that came from fishing, nor was I able to use the fish in any recipes, alchemical, or provisions. However, there was a book that hinted at the ability to cook the fish, so it might be in there before they release. Given that I only had about 15 hours with ESO in total, I'm not ready to say whether or not it's good. The PvP aspect might be astounding, but I never ran into it. There were a few interesting quests here and there, but nothing that gave me the chills that some of the Skyrim questlines gave me. Crafting seemed interesting, but it also felt very tedious collecting all the resources necessary to do it. And some of the items, particularly for the additional attributes you can give to armor and weapons, almost never appeared. There are many unanswered questions for me. I found no trading system or auction house in my travels. The guild system seemed fairly inconsequential at the low levels I'd ventured around at. Grouping is encouraged, but most people can't seem to be bothered with it unless they're playing with friends. That in particular made me think of Guild Wars 2, where all nearby players were in essence grouped for certain encounters, which is something ESO might want to consider. While the world is certainly beautiful in its own way, it did not give me the same epic feel that Skyrim did. Overall, the lack of player agency in the quests and exploration, particularly when it came to thieving activities, made ESO feel like a generic version of the Elder Scrolls series. In essence, ESO is not unlike a reskinning of a standard MMORPG, with an Elder Scrolls theme.
Do not fear. This one won't jump. But the thought has occurred.
Certainly, I won't be paying a subscription for it, but when it goes free to play, I'll definitely give it another look. Thanks for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. I would much appreciate it. And if you want to see more things like this, subscribe, and I will make them.